Time to put your galleons where your mouth is, by Tsume Yuki. Chapter 1. Along came a little brother. Sitting beside the cot of his young brother, Harry James Potter, known now to everyone else as Turais Rigel Black, rubbed one finger slowly down the stretch of his forehead, tracing the outline of the lightning bolt scar that sat there. Walburga had shrieked and shrieked when she came to wake him up the morning of November the 1st to see blood all over his pillow. Apparently, he'd scratched the scar into his head whilst sleeping. That was a new way of requiring it, but once again, he was now, as Draco Malfoy had so beautifully put it long ago, a scarhead. His newest mother had been furious that the imperfection wouldn't leave his head, right up until Orion had pointed out that it was the rune Sowillo, known for guidance and success. Walburga apparently hadn't taken ancient runes for an elective, while her husband clearly had. After that, the duo seemed to have accepted it, even proudly shown it off to Arcturus, Orion's father, and thus Harry's paternal grandfather. The older man had hummed, nodding slightly, and bolted the scar, but had done no more than that. He'd been left alone after that. His parents had been growing worried, for Harry had yet to speak a word to them. Creature had been assigned to read him books whenever he had free time, so both he and Sirius would usually spend an hour or two a day laid out on the large playpen floor with Creature regarding them with tales of Merlin and Morgana. It was the first time Harry had grown up in a dark family so close to what he considered his own time, and so far it had certainly been an experience. Turais! Are you awake yet? There are presents to... Turais, where are you? Harry smiled slightly, watching as Sirius's eyes opened in unpleasant surprise at the screaming banshee that was their mother, the baby blue orbs starting to water. Harry's own eyes had just settled into the typical gray of the Black family, but he was well aware that whenever he used magic, more magic than any average person could, that they would glow their usual green. The baby Sirius before him, not even a third of a year old, let out a low hiccup, and in that moment Harry knew he was about to start crying. Reaching inside himself, Harry snatched at his magic, the energy that still fluctuated and would until he kept exercising it, before drawing it out. Balls of light, all different colors, shapes, and sizes, bloomed into existence. Harry twisted at the light, at the magic, till a set of miniature Patroni were dancing around Sirius. Padfoot, leaping back and forth, no bigger than Harry's leg, was followed by Prongs, and then Moony. The trio kept circling, leaping over one another as Sirius let out a small squeal. His eyesight wouldn't be good enough to recognize the figures, but the fact he took joy in them was good enough for Harry, who was sat by the boy's bedside, leading the trio through their movements. A sharp intake of breath from behind him let Harry know he wasn't alone, and he snapped around to look at his mother and father, both of whom were staring at the spot where the marauders had been. What was that? Turais! Were you doing magic? Walburga shot forwards, picking him up, and Harry grunted, squirming about till he was once again facing Sirius. His new mother let out a screech of annoyance, passing him off to Orion, whom just held him by the waist, leaving Harry almost horizontal in his urge to stay close to Sirius. They didn't let him near his younger brother too much, he wasn't sure why, but it really annoyed him. Sirius sad. Dear Merlin, he hated dumbing himself down, but he'd draw even more attention if he were to suddenly start speaking in sentences. What were you doing, Tobias? We told you magic is dangerous near Sirius, he's too young. Harry could understand Orion's worry. They would you want about the two Blacks, but right now, they did care about them. Even if they had a funny way of showing it. Orion was a lot calmer than his wife, that was for sure. And maybe Harry should show his talent a little more, because then maybe they'd let him stay closer to Sirius. Appy! Harry finally slurred out, summoning up a small Patronus of Padfoot once again, letting the dog dance back over to Sirius, but not before brushing against Orion's fingers. The man lady dropped him! Salazar! Walburga! That was a Patronus! I felt it! Just touch it! It's exactly like one! Harry directed the dog to brush its furry form against Walburga's arm, who clutched tighter at the gurgling Sirius. Harry was twisted around again till he was staring into Orion's eyes, blinking his own with as much innocence as he could muster. Are you doing that consciously? Did you summon that magic to make Sirius happy again? Harry pretended to think about it before slowly nodding, summoning up Prongs and Moony again. A snap from the left had the both of them turning towards Walburga, who'd put down the now amused Sirius in order to take a picture of the both of them, surrounded by the two new patroni that Harry had called up. "No one would believe us unless we had proof," she snapped in return, shuffling off, no doubt to get her evidence as quickly as possible. Harry watched the woman go, somewhat bemused. So much pride in the House of Black and his children. "Shall we go downstairs, then?" Nestled almost fully underneath the Christmas tree, Harry wiggled through the multitude of gifts that had been sent to both himself and Sirius from the other dark families that sat at the top of the political chain. There were some good presents, but he couldn't really use a dragon leather wand holster now. Well, he could, but he'd have to shrink it down and call up the Elder Wand, something which would undoubtedly startle his parents. Walburga, in a display of motherly affection that had astounded Harry, was cradling a sleeping Sirius close to her chest while Orion went to fetch their cousins from the fireplace. The three Black sisters would be coming over for an hour or so, just for present giving and thank yous. And now this year, where he wasn't sleeping through it, he'd probably be expected to say the same thing. Shoot. He didn't like it. Narcissa was only 2.5 years his elder, whilst Andromeda was 4 years older, with Bellatrix born 6.5 years before him, putting her at 8 years old. Harry was just thankful that he'd been young enough that Walburga saw no point in taking him out to meet his family, only letting them come to him. However, he had a deep feeling within his stomach that this wouldn't be the status quo for much longer. Ignoring the sounds of the fireplace bursting to life elsewhere in the house, Harry finally spotted the present that had been calling him. A small box, wrapped neatly in black paper with only the lightest of shines to it. Death's usual present, then. Ripping open the package, he found inside the customary baby bracelet, the symbol of the Hallows held between two strands of soft leather. From past experience, he knew it would grow as he did, eventually becoming a simple-looking leather necklace that would see the metal symbol heat whenever he was using one of the Hallows, yet another reminder of just what he was. "Merry Christmas, Aunt Walburga!" The trio of voices ripped Harry from his music. A small sigh falling from his lips as he carefully attached the bracelet to his wrist. It would not be coming off unless he wanted it to. "Turais! Come out from under that tree right now!" Grimacing, Harry slowly backed up, lifting his head once he had the room to observe his three cousins. Nerissa was the only blonde, as expected, and looked innocently young, now sat on the sofa next to her aunt. Andromeda was too busy cooing over Sirius and asking when he'd be old enough to crawl, which meant, "Hello, Ickle Turais." Dear Merlin, that phrase had started in childhood. Harry sat back on his rump, frowning, at the same time mentally clocking his aunt and uncle entering the door. "Hello, Belle," Harry muttered back, his face almost dead from lack of movement. Bellatrix seemed somewhat thrown by the fact he hadn't cried or something, because her big dark eyes were blinking at him in shock. "Turais! Come here! Show your aunt and uncle the magic you did this morning!" Harry fought down the urge to snarl. He was not a performing monkey! And had this been any other child, disregarding the fact any other child wouldn't have been able to perform the magic he had, then there'd have been no chance for a repeat performance. However, he was who he was, and if his so-called genius was going to show early, then it was going to show early. As such, Harry began making his way over on unsteady feet as Bellatrix recited her last bout of accidental magic. "Pafu ongs o uni." "Can you manage all three?" Orion had returned now, creature behind him, holding up all the presents they'd been given with magic. Harry chewed on his lip, looking at the now awake Sirius before nodding slowly. Twisting his wrist and giving a small wiggle of his fingers, Harry watched as his patroni danced free, a small Moony and Padfoot racing to the latter human's counterpart and dancing before his eyes as Sirius let out a giggle at the sight. And for the shock factor, Harry had seen to it Prongs was full size, dancing in the open space upon the rug before snorting into Narcissa's hair, who let out a cry of shock. "Sweet Salazar, that's a Patronus!" "He never did a big one earlier, it was 3 small ones. Turais, can you make them all big?" Orion had crouched down to his level now, and Harry decided to push him, holding out his arms in an obvious request to be held up. They had not carried him since he'd learned to walk, leaving it to Creature to make sure he could get down the stairs okay. Now, however, it looked like they'd be taking a bit more of an interest. 2 warm hands came together around his middle, lifting him up till he was resting against Orion's side. He was significantly easier to melt than Walburga, who was looking rather annoyed Orion was still babying him. In response, Harry had both Padfoot and Moony dance over to Prong, growing as they went till a fully sized werewolf Patronus was sat between a stag and Grim. That is a werewolf. Secondus, that boy is holding 3 Patroni steady without a wand. His aunt by marriage, Durella, seemed to be the most level-headed. She was the source of Nerissa's light hair, that much was obvious. Flicking his wrist again, Harry let the Patroni fade away and watched as the adults went on to discuss him like a pack of hyenas fighting over a corpse. I thought you were lying when you said he blew the windows out at his birth. I don't need to lie. Turais is exceptional, as expected of the next heir to the House of Black. Harry looked down at his new jewelry, noting that the symbol that had been made of metal was now a soft plastic, ready to teethe on. Death was always looking out for him, especially in this still developing small body. He was a late teether this time, which was irritating. Bellatrix was trying to get some more attention now, almost jumping up and down in front of her parents, who were still discussing with Walburga. A hand ran through his hair, and Harry paused, twisting to get a better look at the source. His father was smiling at him, before, shockingly enough, pressing a kiss to his temples. You will be great, son. Harry could only nod slightly, startled. Maybe he could keep this family from hating each other if he tried hard enough. Just maybe.